the one thing that like we haven't drawn a correlation to is obviously the rising kind of obesity epidemic, and then you've got the rise in mental health epidemic at the same time. And you're basically saying that you don't think it's a coincidence that we've got metabolic syndrome rising and our mental health is getting kind of weaker and poorer at the same time.
It is not at all a coincidence. And we actually have really good scientific reasons to believe that. So we do have strong correlational studies or epidemiological studies. And everybody then argues, well, correlation doesn't equal causation. Yes, I get it. I know that. So then we go into, well, is there any mechanistic studies, or are there any animal model studies where we expose animals to high levels of ultra-processed foods, for instance, and then do they develop symptoms of depression or anxiety or metabolic syndrome or obesity, diabetes, other things? And we have thousands of research articles on that. So, yes, correlations are there, but it goes far beyond correlations. And ultimately, the way I think about it, so a lot of people think about obesity as just a disorder, a disease of willpower. That people are just, they just love the taste of tasty foods and they can't put it down. And diabetes, usually type 2 diabetes in particular, certainly not type 1, but type 2 diabetes is often thought to be just a consequence of obesity. Those people are just over-consuming calories. And if they would just stop over-consuming calories, everything would be fine. Instead, I think of both disorders, along with cardiovascular disease and others, as actually much more complicated disorders that do involve the brain as well, because the brain is actually helping to regulate your appetite, whether you feel full, but it's also helping to regulate your whole body metabolism, how many calories your body's actually burning. And so I think about obesity and diabetes as metabolic disorders, that they are disorders of cell function, that cells somewhere in your brain or body are not functioning optimally. And that is resulting in the symptoms of being overweight or the symptoms of glucose dysregulation that we call diabetes. And at the same time that's happening, your brain might be affected too. And if your brain is being greatly impacted, it might come out as mental illness. And this actually spans the whole spectrum of what we call mental disorders. So if your parents are metabolically unhealthy, it might actually impact your neurodevelopment. And it's through no fault of the child's, you're a little fetus inside your mother's womb, and like it's not on you. But you may actually have neurodevelopmental differences, if you will, that might end up showing themselves as autism spectrum or ADHD or a learning disorder or something else. And for those who don't know, the rates of all of those are skyrocketing. Rates of autism have quadrupled, and recent evidence over the last couple of years says that the rates are probably even higher than that now.
It's like 178% or something increase.
It's out of control. And I don't think it's a coincidence. Again, this isn't about shaming parents. This is about understanding that parents who are overweight or obese have a metabolic problem in their cells. They often don't know why or what's wrong or what they need to do about it, because they're getting such conflicting advice about just eat less. You can keep eating those ultra-processed foods. Those are fine. Just eat less of them. And I actually don't think that advice is helpful at all. I think that advice is still harmful because people can't sustain that you can't eat less of a toxic food. So if parents are metabolically compromised, and that can be a lot of things, just older age. So a father who's older is more likely to have a child with a neurodevelopmental condition, for example, because we get metabolically less healthy as we get older. But that's one spectrum. And then there's everything in between: depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, and then all the way to neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's disease. that there's, some people are coining the term type 3 diabetes to say that Alzheimer's disease may in fact be diabetes of the brain, which essentially means your brain isn't getting enough energy from glucose. It's a brain metabolism problem. And that is why brain cells are actually slowly but surely shrinking and ultimately maybe dying because they are metabolically compromised.